trauma can happen by commission or omission. So I can traumatize you through my action, or I can traumatize you through my inaction.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring You, our podcast to navigate you through the personal development jungle. My name is Darren Alexandra of Mind Course CIC and Elysium NLP.
And I'm Alexandra, nature coach and forest bathing guide.
Welcome everyone, and welcome to our special guest this time. It is Ben Kelly. How are you doing, Ben?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. Thanks for being on the show. Really nice to see you. We met at the Wellbeing Collective from It's Mental the other week. So it was a quick turnaround for you to come on the show. It's fantastic. First and foremost, who are you?
Who am I?
Who are you?
Well, I'm a man that's just getting over a very burnt head from that weekend.
We have our, it's great. I always say it's like with mine gets so red. If I stand on a street corner, the traffic starts stopping, thinking it's a traffic light. So I know what you mean.
I ran. So who am I? I'm a mindfulness and meditation teacher and a hypnotherapist. And so, yeah, as you said, we met at the It's Mental networking thing. And then on the Sunday, there was the brilliant Wellbeing Festival near where I live. So I ran an event there, did a speech, and then ran a breathwork session as well.
Oh, excellent.
We had.
So how was it?
It was such an awesome day. It was also such a British day because I started off with soggy shoes, like squelching soggy shoes, because it launched it down. And I ended up the day with a burnt head. You can't plan.
4 seasons, 1 day. That's all you can say about the British weather. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it was a very cool day, brilliantly organized, and met some really fantastic people. Really loved that. Got to talk a bit about some of my passions. I did a speech on overcoming limiting beliefs, which is something that I think is really, really important. We all pick them up throughout our lives. And then got to run some mindful breath work, which is really, really important. It's been a big part of my journey. So yeah, I had a fantastic day.
Yeah, I was speaking to Stephen Robertson yesterday, and we're hoping to get him on the podcast sometime next month. So it's a very big event, isn't it? If we touch briefly on it, the family wellbeing event is in Rivington, if I remember rightly.
Yeah. Rivington, which is the West Pennine Moors.
Yeah,
we're actually lucky enough to live on. So I live in a place called Horwich.
I know it well.
Yeah. So that's at the foot of Rivington. So we're really, really lucky there. And yeah, so it was spread across the terraced gardens. I don't know how many different sort of vendors and participants there were, but I feel like there was maybe 50 plus.
Yeah. I can't remember what Stephen said, but I mean, they were expecting something like 1,500 people. It's a massive, and it's a big family event, isn't it? I mean, you've got everything. You've got your usual stalls and everything there that for people to sell their wares and their services. But you've also got a lot of activities like the walks, the Nordic walking, cycling.
And there was mushroom foraging. I know this because my partner came to support me, but then she actually disappeared off on a mushroom foraging trip. There was, because it's above the reservoirs, there was some water sports going on. There's a Go Ape there, so I believe that Go Ape was active as well.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was much more up the other end of it, so I didn't see a lot of that. There was axe throwing. So a massive variety of really, really cool, inclusive stuff going on. And yeah, everybody had an amazing time. Really, really good.
So what did you bring to the table there? What was it you were doing there again?
So I was promoting one of my businesses, which is Horrocks Hypnotherapy. I am a hypnotherapist by trade. And so, yeah, I was there promoting myself. And then I was also there as a speaker. So that's what I was expecting to be doing. And then last minute, they said to me, how would you feel about running a breathwork session as well? Now, breathwork is quite an expansive subject and something that I wanted to make sure I only brought sort of a very light version of it in, because it can be quite an extreme thing. So we did a mindful breathing session that turned into a little bit of a breathwork session, just some coherent, balanced breathing, and then started to talk a little bit with those participants about how we can start to use breathing within change work, which I'm a really big fan of how we can keep regulating our nervous system through our breath, whilst then introducing potentially arousing topics, things that might trigger us into upset, things that, as obviously you know, Darren, what we're always looking to do is to create that mismatch, that contradiction between the known and where we want to get to. And so what I find is breathing, whilst we're regulating our breath, which can regulate our nervous system, then adding in a problematic thought, our nervous system not shifting into fight or flight, starts to create that mismatch straight away, which means that we can then start to explore more problematic topics ourselves, going into those places that might have otherwise been dangerous for us, and start to prove. Sorry, go on.
Oh, carry on. Sorry, mate.
Just say prove to our nervous system, that feedback loop back into our brain, that really there isn't that danger.
It's kind of classic NLP, isn't it? It's confusing that issue into misbelieving that that's actually real of our thoughts. I mean, we had Claire Pritchard on, who's just started doing a coaching business, and and she was talking about breath work. And it's interesting, you know, since then, I mean, a friend or a colleague I've worked with, ex-military, and he says himself, the changes that breath work has helped him, you know, he wouldn't have ever thought of doing something like that. Being the military guy, the ego, machoism, and all that. But when the breath work and what it's done with him, you know, it's helped him not only clear his head, helped him lose weight, feel better in himself, everything. You know, it's just regulating your breathing it can be so transformative.
Absolutely. And this is me and Alexandra were talking whilst you were having technical difficulties a lot about the somatic nature of trauma, you know, how trauma lives in the body as well as the mind. Talking a bit about Peter Levine's work of getting stuck in that freeze state, which means that the body really gets the trauma stored in it. And so that physical shift that we can create through breathing is so fundamentally important. You know, the release that we can create and how we can start to discharge so much energy through our breath is just phenomenal. When it was new to me, I was very surprised by how much we could do. You know, and breath can be just breathing, it can be humming, it can be chanting, and all of those things are so useful in regulating our system. And that regulation is is key to starting to show that feedback into our brain that that problem doesn't exist in the here and now, which is obviously the hallmark of trauma, isn't it? That the limbic system, that fight or flight mode, is still in that danger. And so the more we can introduce the knowledge that actually we're not there anymore. Look, I can have this thought, but the body is still calm. That in itself is transformational in so many ways.
Yeah,
I think safety plays like you said, feeling safe. It's such a key important thing to realize, that you are in the here and now, you are safe. Whatever you feel is just a memory of a past experience. And I think anything that helps you feeling or creating this safe space in the here and now is very important. And I'm just curious with, because it was this family event, do you do breath work with children or more for adults?
This was more adults. There were children crawling around on mats. We started off in a very gentle, mindful relaxation that everybody took part in. And then we started to watch our breath that everybody took part in. But then the coherent breathing, which is only as simple as just getting an even flow of 5-5 or 6-6 in and out. It was only the adults. Not even all of the adults did that. I'm very much of the case that, and this is the same when I run mindfulness classes, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Yeah, if you're not going to be comfy this time or at all, then this bit's not for you. And that's okay. It's not necessarily for a beginner. I don't personally feel. I know that when I first started meditating, and we're talking about 15 years ago, breathing was a real problem around meditation. And I've met many, many meditators over the years and encountered them during or after sessions that I've run, where people say, I couldn't watch my breath. And it is tricky, as soon as we start watching it, we start judging it, and we start trying to control it. And it took me quite a long time to be able to be with my breath without having that need to change it, to even be comfortable with, hey, I'm breathing really shallow and really fast right now. And actually, that's not very comfortable. And starting to get used to saying, and that's okay. I can be, and again, like you said before, Alexandra, safe. I can be safe even when I'm not comfortable. I can be okay with discomfort. And starting to create more capacity around these things. This is where I think all of these tools are just different routes into the same. You're creating capacity, creating a resilience to be able to be with those feelings, with those thoughts, without furthering a problematic cycle or an unproductive cycle. But yeah, no proper breath work for kids. I wouldn't personally feel comfortable with that, especially not at that level, no.
I also agree that breath work, like when I look at my history, it took me a while to be able to meditate or do breath work without my nervous system getting into shutdown, because I had that before, like that I was meditating or becoming quiet, and there was this split second where I nearly lost consciousness, and I was like waking up again. And that's really because through my trauma, my nervous system was always overactive. And then when I came into stillness, my body realized, or the system thought, oh my God, we can't fight, we can't flee, let's go into shutdown, the last resort of survival. And then once I started working more, healing my inner wounds, making progress, then I also become more comfortable with breath work or meditation. And now it's so much easier than before. So I think there's always a time for things to come into your life, and even if it doesn't work right now, maybe in 6 months' time, it becomes easier to do it.
Absolutely. And maybe as well, part of the journey into that is moving through discomfort. And I think that this is what I say to, especially on day one of a new course, I'll always say to people, you might have found that really hard, you might have found that really uncomfortable. And that's kind of the point, because we don't want to learn to sail on stormy seas. One day you're going to need to, or really want to, control your mind. Life throws us curveballs, life throws us traumas and really hard tasks to get through. That's not when we want to start trying to learn to take control of our mind. So if we can sit with some discomfort and start to learn around that in a nice room, and start to even eke out a few more seconds here and there, and be able to return ourselves to that calm state, that space between. The more we get used to returning there, think of it like just training your dog to sit. You don't want to train your dog to sit, a few years on. You want to train it when it's a puppy. You want to train it at the perfect time. So whenever we can start is our perfect time. But we don't want to wait until we need it. You'd learn to sail in the harbor or on a little reservoir or something like that before you'd ever consider going out into the bigger waters. And so we create a nurturing environment so we can be a little bit uncomfortable. And we can get used to that. By the time, hopefully, then that we really want it, we'll have that rigor, that normality. I mean, this is not how I did it. I went into these things because I was in a very bad place. So, I often had an anxious breath rate. I was often very stressed out or in fight or flight mode when I would be trying to do these things. And it made my early practices very, very difficult. And then one of actually the first people I ever helped with trauma was one of my friends who'd come back from Afghanistan. And his wife had given him some breathing techniques to do. And we were hiking this one day, and I said to him, "How's it going?" And he said, "It's awful." And I said, "What's awful about it?" I knew obviously that his overall state was awful, but what's awful about what she's given you to do? And he said, "It's making me feel worse." He said, and it was box breathing that she'd given him to do. So 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4. And he was trying to do that in the middle of a panic attack. And I said to him, "Is that the only time you're practicing it?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "And what do you do? Do you just start practicing it by doing that?" He said, "Yeah." It's like, well, that's going to be rough, isn't it? So we started building up a system for him, one of practice when he didn't need to practice, or he wasn't in the midst of it. And then also adding in something that I think is really key, which is some physical experiencing beforehand. So I always like to have people get into the here and now a little bit before they try and control their breath. Because if our brain and our body have responded to an environmental trigger that's told us that we're not safe, then we're fighting it. And actually we're creating more and more resistance. Our body's in that state because it's had the signal to say, fight or flee. Mm. So I don't really want at that point for us to fight the fight or to fight the escape. I want us first to ground ourselves into the here and now and take a little moment to say, oh, no, not over there again. Mm. It's not happening again. And once we've even just broke that start of the cycle, that's when we'd want to start breathing. And so we added that in for maybe a week, and then we caught up, and he said that already fundamentally it was different because he wasn't in that total resistance. He'd just taken himself that little bit out of it first. So I found that was really, really important. But that made me then quite intrigued about how to better show somebody's brain that they weren't in it. And a little bit of research on my part brought me to hypnotherapy. And that felt at the time like the missing thing from what I'd been doing, which was teaching meditations, teaching mindfulness. And so I lost myself in that for quite a few years. And I found that was such a wonderful tool for many change works, for creating any level of transformational change, but especially in helping the brain to reprocess those events that had created those traumas in the first place. And so I was working on that for a long time. And then, again, as we were talking about before, it left still that physical element, which brought me back full circle into reintroducing more of the mindfulness and the meditations. And then I went off and I did my trauma-informed coaching from there. And then everything started to make a lot more sense once it became a holistic, unified approach to it, dealing with the mind and with the body at the same time. So that's kind of where I've got to at the moment in private practice.
And I feel it's a nice combination that you bring, or you bring it into a nice mix when working with trauma. Like on the one hand, you have the bottom up approach in including the body, but also the top down approach through mindfulness, psychoeducation as well. So it's really, like you said, a very holistic approach. Do you maybe just, because not everyone might be familiar with hypnotherapy, do you just maybe want to explain in a few sentences what it's all about and why it's so beneficial?
Absolutely. Thank you. So it's not mind control and it's not magic, and that's a shame. But I'm forever explaining it to people, so I might as well just start with that because it feels like the thing I'm always having to tell people. Mm. Hypnosis. So hypnotherapy is therapy using hypnosis as a tool. Hypnosis is a great way to get beyond what Mike Mandel would call the critical faculty, which is the judging mind, and get to use really old language to get into the subconscious, where we store those programs, those beliefs, those stories, so that we can start to make rapid, long-lasting change. Hypnosis itself, as I say, is just a tool around making somebody reach a state of increased suggestibility. A lot of us know hypnosis from comedy and from stage shows, often the first thing that people will say to me is, are you going to make me act like a chicken? And fun answer, yes, I am. But real answer, even if I want to, the thing would still be, are you going to make you act like a chicken? Because I could suggest it, but if you don't take on my suggestion, then we're not getting anywhere. And that's often surprising to people, because then they think, well, we saw it on stage in Benidorm or in Tenerife, and that guy was acting like an idiot on stage. Well, yeah, he wanted to get on stage. He was already quite open to acting like an idiot. That's good fun. So he was open to that sort of suggestion. He was open to the idea of it. He was in it. And at that point, it's not in any way to say that people are acting up or just pretending. Although there is always an element of play involved, because what we're doing is we're inviting people to let go into pure imagination. And when you've done that, when you've immersed yourself, for instance, into being a chicken and let go of any thought of not being a chicken, then you're just having a pure experience. And then therapeutically, because the whole chicken thing's not so therapeutic, although laughter is always great medicine, therapeutically, what we can do is we can have you immerse into contradiction. That's a tricky idea, isn't it? So again, just staying with trauma, if one of your triggers for trauma is the supermarket, then I might have you immerse into being calm, happy, relaxed, and then to be in the supermarket, to help your brain have an experience where that wasn't dangerous. A lot of change. One of my favorite people is a man called Bruce Ecker, who's spoken a lot about transformational therapy, about memory reconsolidation, which I always think of as read-write documents and read-only documents. The programs in the brain, we start them off as read-write, and then once they're created, they go to read-only, and of turning them back into read-write documents so we can update them. And that's what memory reconsolidation is. It's unconsolidating the memory, which is taking it back into read-write form, so that then we can rewrite it, overwrite it with a new story, a new learning, before we allow it to save again with its new parameters, its new programming. Hypnosis is an amazing way to do this, because what we're doing with that is we're offering up contradiction. Breath work is very similar, but just to stay with hypnosis, the contradiction between the imagination, because what we learn is that the brain can't really tell the difference between imagination and reality. I'm sure we all know this, because we can all upset ourselves with a thought. So through that, we can also heal ourselves with a thought, when that thought can be true enough. And so by going through varied experiences that we might have written a story around and had a nervous system expectation of that experience being negative, that experience being dangerous, and then going and having a contradictory experience that's as real or even realer than life, that can rapidly allow the brain to take on brand new points of view, brand new perspectives. And with that, we can offer in lots of other perspectives, lots of suggestion around, well, really, however somebody wants to be. So yeah, hypnosis is, from my point of view, a tool within therapy. And so it's a way to deliver these changes at the very deepest lasting levels. And it's something that I'm very passionate about.
It's interesting with hypnosis because it's like you say, people have this misconception about it. And I think, you know, when you're talking about the meditation, the breathwork before as well, is people don't have the capacity to think it takes time to go through this. You know, they think it's a quick fix, one pill, that's it, done. You have to go through those negatives in order to get through to the positive side of things. You've got to get to the other. There's no. It's like the old image of the flowing river, the fast flowing river. You know, you've got to use the stepping stones to get to the other side, and to do that, you've got to get through that rough water to get there, haven't you? So people need to have a bit more. More of an expectation, I suppose, in a way that does take time. It takes time to master doing the breath work. It needs time to master taking yourself into the subconscious. It takes time to let your mind take those challenges and go into a different place before you can start seeing the outcomes. Would you agree?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Overall, yes. For holistic, widespread life change, I would completely agree. But honestly, Darren, I always say that change happens in an instant. How long it takes us to ready ourselves for the change, how long it takes us to reconcile the change into our life, that can take a very long time. Mm-hmm. The change itself happens in a moment. Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. So how our brain actually fires differently. I think a lot of what I do in this room or on Zoom, a bit like a court case. Your brain has held one point of view. Limiting beliefs are a real good subject for this. So you took on a point of view in your younger life through experience, through others' suggestion, might have been through one thing or many things, but at some point you agreed to it. You didn't mean to, but one day you said, yeah, you're right. I must be rubbish. I must be stupid. I had that. I had some undiagnosed conditions at school. I didn't know that I had dyslexia. I didn't know that I was autistic. So all I knew, because no one else knew it either, was that I couldn't do it the same as everybody else. And everyone else was really happy to tell me I was thick. And eventually I heard that story enough that it became my reason as well. Now, I could have not. A different timeline of me wouldn't have taken that. But eventually I did. Well, it was chipped away, it was chipped away, it was chipped away, a little bit like, if you hit away at a brick with a hammer, you might be chipping away, creating a flaw, but that crack happens in one moment. Yeah, one specific strike creates that rupture. Now, with my personal work and then how we do it here, it's like that court case. So that's then the prosecution has been going on the same case for God knows how long. For me, it was a good sort of 20 years. I'm thick, I'm useless, I can't learn stuff, I can't achieve stuff. People like me can't do things like that. Building up the case for the defense took a while. And that's often done in closed rooms where you get all the evidence together, you build up that case. And that's often the first few sessions that I'll do with a client, is build up the contradiction between the story, the belief, the experience that they've had up till now, and the reality that we want to introduce them to going forward. How is it that you're not thick? What evidence can life show us? What resources do we have already? Now, once we know that our case is good enough, then hypnosis becomes that tool almost for us to take it to court. Yeah, we wouldn't want to offer up that contradiction when it wasn't ready, when the evidence wasn't good enough, didn't cover enough bases, because actually that could have the outcome of only proving, see, I'm right, I can't change. Ineffective therapy is dangerous, we know this. So actually it's only once you've got the client to the point where you can see, or once you can see that they can sit with the contradiction that you've built up together. And again, for my work, I had to go and look a lot at all of the ways that maybe that story hadn't been true, and sit with that and create a reality of that before I could sit with those two. I always think of it like two hands holding something different, and one won't show the other what it has. And it has to be like that until we're ready. Because once we get it right and we show them each other, when our new story is strong enough, when the contradiction is right, that's how we can overwrite that old learning. And that really can happen in minutes. And that's why, I have to give an awkward yes and no answer, because building up the contradiction, who knows? I mean, often in that first session I'll spend with somebody, when they start talking, you can hear in the best way that they're full of crap. Yeah, that only they're willing to believe a story of them being less than. I had a lady recently, she was talking about she couldn't speak out in public. She couldn't be heard. She was very nervous. She was very embarrassed. People like her shouldn't speak up, all of these different things. And she was a mum. And so I said, okay, so what would happen if your son was on the other side of a restaurant? Maybe he said, Mum, I'm just going to go to the toilet. And she had I think he was about 9 or 10. So it'd be reasonable that he would go to the toilet on his own. What would happen if you saw him actually walking towards the exit and about to go out the exit? What would you do? I'd scream across the restaurant. Boom. So part of you has that resource. It's only the part of you that holds that old belief. And even just asking her that and her answering, the eyes went all over the show, which is that search for understanding. The eye movement is the fantastic thing, one, for us to see when change is taking place, but also to create change. And straight away, I could see that there it is. There's that contradiction of there is a time that you can do that. And often we can only live in these places because it's black and white. I can't do that. Okay, well, what about when you can do that? And that's the start of that change, because as soon as we have that, we have part of our case, and we can go and deliver that back. And that mismatch between that being dangerous to speak out in public and actually that being the safest, most appropriate thing to do in that moment, showing those two hands to each other, that's such a huge contradiction. And that actually, that question and that realization, that probably was over a minute. And trauma's a lot like this as well. This is one of these things that is quite, I'm just going to use the word mad. It is quite mad, is how quickly we can help the brain overcome trauma, even though the trauma could have been so awful, or at least the incident or incidents that created the wound, that created the trauma. They could have been horrific. And yet there are ways that within the matter of, maybe 30 or 40 minutes, we can have the brain totally reprocess that so that it can be filed away as it should. And when I say that, what I mean by that is taking it from short-term memory and filing it up into long-term memory, taking it out of being an emotional memory stored in the limbic system, which is that fight or flight area, and it going where it should have originally, so that it's a safe memory, not a nice memory, but a safe memory. There's something called the rewind technique. Obviously, you being an NLPer, you're familiar with it from, do you guys call it VLK? No, visual, VAK, is it? Visual
VAK.
Audio Kinetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Dr. Musk took it and he created what we call the rewind with it. And then Human Givens have taken it. Anthony Jacquin's done some really cool stuff with it. And I've studied it with these different people. I was actually down in Birmingham earlier this year with Dr. Musk in his seminar. And the rewind is so cool because actually so rapidly, and it takes longer to explain the bloody technique to the person than it does to actually run it. And often before they've even left the room, you can go and check and they can't find it. They can have come in heavily traumatized. Easily, even the mere thought of that memory being problematic. And the cool thing about that technique is we don't have to talk about it. Which, why would I want you to talk about something if I don't need you to? We can just call it the memory or the incident. And by the time we've finished with it, you can safely recall it, which means that you no longer need to recall it. And again, that is often, most of the time around that, as I say, is explaining it or building the rapport and the trust for somebody to allow you to go near it.
I'm just wondering, do you see hypnotherapy working best when you still have memory of the trauma? Like, for example, in my instance, I've been in and out of hospital for the first 4 years of my life. So I have no recollection of whatsoever what happened to me. And I always struggle a bit with the thought that trauma can be healed within seconds or with 40 minutes. So I'm just wondering, do you see, is there a correlation if something happened to you when you were 25 and you, like, your brain was already fully developed, compared to when something happened to you over a long period of time and consecutively in the first 2-3 years of your life?
Yeah, very different. And so one of the biggest differences there would be, I'm referring maybe more to what we'd call acute trauma, which is more of a single incident situation, whereas you're referring maybe more to complex trauma.
Yeah.
And that's more cumulative. Now, often what we're talking about more in complex or cumulative traumas is parts therapy. Now, I love parts therapy. You know, Schwartz and IFS is really close to my heart. And these are learnings of, you know, a part of you or an ego state or a schema, depending on what we want to call it. This is a lot of the time then when it's general beliefs more than, they're learnings about you. They may be learnings about how safe you are. It's much more about those sort of fundamental learnings. It's a, you know, trauma can happen by commission or omission. So I can traumatize you through my action, or I can traumatize you through my inaction. And so the rewind technique and the likes of that are much more around commission. Omission is very different. When you didn't receive the love, the care, the nurture, the belief in safety, whatever those learnings we didn't take on, that's connecting you then in the right way to those resources. And if me and you were working at that, and, you know, probably shouldn't just go and throw this on the podcast because no one will need me anymore once I've done this, but generally when we're talking like this, I'll ask one question, and again, this can be a very transformational question. Are you now who you needed back then? Because generally we have become that person. And once we recognize, because if the answer is no, if the answer is wholeheartedly no, then what that often suggests is, before really we want therapy, we want training. Yeah. We want to pick up the resources. And that can be because we've not recognized the resources, but it can be because we've not learned them. And this is where therapy and training or coaching go hand in hand. But so often the answer to that, again, with some flickering of eyes and some looking around the room, is, oh yeah, I am. Parts therapy, resource state therapy, ego states, whatever we're going to call it, is all about sharing. And this is, again, you know, their words. What we mean is neural networks, parts of the brain that have taken on learnings. And I've always found that they have the intelligence, the resources, the understandings of the brain that created them, which is often why a lot of these learnings can only exist in the dark. I love my kid to pieces, but she's only as smart as a 12-year-old, so she can only reason at a 12-year-old level. Well, stuff I learned as a 12-year-old, it can often only exist until a 40-year-old looks at it. And when that 40-year-old can be objective enough in looking at it, it doesn't sit correctly. And so often that 3-4-year-old, maybe she was in hospital a lot, and no, she doesn't have the memories, but she has the learnings. And maybe she was left on her own for little bits of time, or maybe there was a lot of unknowns because she didn't have the intelligence to reason through with it. Yeah. But you do. And so as soon as we can, and this is where hypnosis is again an amazing tool, is to basically sit you and her in a room together to transport you back, which is just a metaphor that we use in the mind to allow you to reconnect to that old network, which is that's how we'd unconsolidate it, turn it back into that read-write function, so that then you can share all of your resources, even if the resource that you're sharing is just intelligence. Even if it's just you sharing with that earlier version of you, hey, you're safe. Yeah, you're okay. You made it through. And that even in itself can be rapidly transformational. So it depends. And that's so tricky, isn't it? To say that it depends. Yeah. But
I totally agree with you with the parts therapy, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because I think that was a key driver in my own healing journey as well. And also taking her, like mini me, out of the hospital. And that's when I realized when a big shift happened inside me, because I was still very identified with that little girl, not able to be the grown-up that she is now. And I for me, parts therapy really helped me in that connection. Yeah,
absolutely. And also what you would have potentially done through that is, and this goes back to the Peter Levine work, which I found can be done mentally as well as physically, which is so cool, because mental rehearsal is an amazing hypnotic tool that we can use. Is we want to complete the cycle. So he speaks a lot about freeze interrupting the completion of the fight or flight mechanism. Yeah. So what little you wanted to do was get the hell out of that hospital. And yet she was stuck. So she was frozen. And actually that can create, even years later, her being stuck in that time and space, emotionally, internally in you.
Absolutely.
And so you closed the loop. You resourced her, and then you allowed her to carry out the fight or flight mechanism. And our brain only really cares about surviving. That its primary directive, of course, is always to survive. And so I think of it a bit like mapping things. I always like to say, you know, basically we end up with these sort of traumas, especially more of the complex ones. We end up with parts of our map that are just, here be dragons. Yeah. We don't know how to get through it. We can't traverse it. So all we can do is mark as a no-go zone on our map mentally. But that means that we get these predictive errors. So when our brain looks forward, because that's what our brain's always doing, it's using the past to predict the future. And so you go and see a trip to hospital, and your predictive map in your brain goes, oh, we can't do that. And you return to a freeze state because it's dragons on your map. And so once we go and draw out the rest of that map and show you the end of it, show you safety and survival, then it just means that you can complete the prediction that you'll get through it. That turns it from being a chronic stress to an acute stress. So from an inhibitor to a motivator. And you go from, I can't do that, I mustn't do that, to, we best get this over and done with.
I also, with Levine, what I like, this example he always gives with in the animal world, when animals are stressed because they get attacked by a lion but escape, that they shake off this trauma, this adrenaline, this stress energy. And that's what we don't do as human beings. And I think that when I heard that made a big click for me as well, to realize, oh, okay, all this energy that is still stuck in my body that I needed to release as well. Because with complex trauma, I feel you can't just solve it or release it with your mind alone. You need to include the body, especially when something happened to you in the first 4 years of your life. It's all implicit memory. Your brain wasn't developed yet. It's all stuck in the body. Yeah.
Absolutely. And often in hypnosis, what we see is when we've brought somebody out of something revolutionary to them, like we're talking about, there'll be tears. They won't be crying, but there will be tears, because that is a discharge, isn't it? It's cathartic to cry it out. Yeah. Often we will see little judders, little physical movements, and exactly that. Yeah, the gazelle or the deer or whatever, once it's got away, if it did get away, it will shake it off. And we're taught not to do that, aren't we? We're taught that we don't want to have that experience. You know, that physically shaking. I remember at school fighting. After a fight, I would always be, and I always just thought, oh, I'm weak. Oh, I was scared. And I didn't know. Hell no, I had a lot of adrenaline in my body that had to then go somewhere. It wanted to complete that cycle. And the more we actually, well, this is why being trauma informed is so important, isn't it? And this is, I think, where we've got a real revolution going on, because even the idea of the word trauma is quite a new one into our vocabulary. The idea of being traumatized, or how widespread the idea of trauma is becoming normalized. Sometimes misused, but the more we realize that we get trauma. Is it Waking the Tiger? I feel like it might be that he spoke about a lot of this.
Yeah. Yes.
If I remember right, I've got it somewhere. I don't know if I don't think I've got it here, but it's like an old yellow book.
This one in German, but still, that's the Levine, Awakening the Tiger.
Yeah. I went for the English copy. My German's a little bit ropey. But yeah, an amazing, amazing book. And that cycle he talks about, you read it and it just is sensible, isn't it? Mm. I like things that are sensible.
We mentioned on the show a tipping point. Those little changes that people make, but where do you see, either for yourself or your clients, where do they get to the tipping point where they say, where do we need to change? How do I make those changes? And where do I find those changes?
Oh, well, for me, we were asked to take on our, at the time, foster daughter, my partner's niece. And I couldn't do that. I was in a very, very bad place. I was suicidal. I was heavily self-medicating. I was in a very, very dark place. And my environment was shifting. So for me, it was the tipping point was something had to give. And it was almost non-optional. Either I was going to die or I had to do something about it. And that created, I think for me, an opportunity, because something had to give. And otherwise there was only one other option. And so I could just lean into it. If I failed what I was trying to do at that point, the failure was going to be a lot bigger. There was going to be no return. So I immersed myself in change. And I think often it's that, when we'll put up with crap forever for ourselves. And you see this in domestic abuse. Maybe because of past traumas, maybe because of limiting beliefs. Maybe it's because abuse usually starts in what I think of as 10,000 small agreements. Very rarely does anyone get slapped on the first date and think he's the man of my dreams. It's much more of the case of, tiny, tiny micro agreements of, no, okay, I won't wear that. I get it. You're self-conscious. I don't want to embarrass you. Oh no, of course I can tone that down. Oh no, of course I don't need to go out tonight. It's tiny agreements that get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now that may get to, and often does get to, the point of serious abuse that, however heartbreaking it is, we'll often see that the victim of that will put up with it for a long time until it's turned on the kids. And that's too much. And even if that person might have put up with it for a huge amount of time, as soon as they see it having a detrimental effect on something that means more than they can put the value on themselves, then they'll go and make that change. And so it's about finding something of enough value. Where that is different for everybody. I was lucky enough to find that value in a child. She was at that point more important than me. I couldn't properly do it for me. I tried, and I'd slipped too far, and I didn't have the worth in me at that point to do it for me. she was worth doing it for. And so we can use someone else. It's almost like calling in the manager. Yeah, we're going to rely on their authority rather than our own, because we don't feel like we have the authority. But as long as I say, oh no, my manager says I can't do that, then I can rely on that, and I can find strength in that. So often we can find that tipping point in the importance of something else in our environment. You'll often hear people, oh, I would have gone and done something stupid if it weren't for, I didn't want to upset my family. I didn't want to hurt my parents. We'll often hear things like that. You couldn't find the worth or the value in yourself. And that in itself is a horrible shame. But you could find that value elsewhere. And sometimes it's just shock. We go and see ourselves in the mirror. You go and see yourself as somebody that you don't recognize anymore. You go and find yourself waking up in a crack den, and that, I guess the answer to this is the same as earlier answers. It's contradiction. Yeah. If I don't have the worth in me, what contradiction does life offer up? The contradiction of a child, the contradiction of the love that you have for somebody else, or the contradiction between what you were trying to do and what you were achieving. The contradiction between the value and the risk. I often think of the boy racer. They might be a fat 50-year-old still with a giant exhaust on the back of their car, and it all, being embarrassing and everything, that would only be impressive really to the 17-year-old version of them. But even the fact that maybe their partner won't get in the car anymore with them, and they've had 9 points on their license for half their driving career, all those things aren't contradictory enough. But the one day that they only just don't hit somebody, all of a sudden, all of the implicit value that they held in that old belief system, the contradiction between that and the value, because again, this is what the brain cares about, isn't it? Value, whether positive or negative value. I'm always trying to seek comfort and pleasure, and I'm always trying to avoid discomfort and danger. So the day that those two things don't sit right anymore, I'd say that that's probably how that tips for most people. I'd just say that the surface level will look different for everybody. But the reality is, it's whatever offers up enough contradiction between what we're doing and what we really want, or where we really want to be.
Yeah, wise words. I'm just conscious of time. Believe it or not, we have actually gone over an hour.
I do talk.
That's what we want. That's what we want. Ben, it's been great, and we could talk a lot more. I know we could. I mean, we probably only touched the surface of some of the stuff that you do. So hopefully we can get you back on and have another chat a bit, and go into a bit more on this. Certainly the trauma side. I'm going to give you your 5 minutes of fame. Unless there's anything Alexandra wants to throw in.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
she's quite.
She knows if she asks anything, we're just going to carry on and carry on.
5 minutes of fame, mate. The floor is yours. Tell the world, where they can get hold of you, what you do, and who you are again.
So my name is Ben Kelly. You can find me at Horwich Hypnotherapy, which is H for hotel, ORWICH hypnotherapy .com. Don't really go on my own website very often. .com.
Don't check yourself out.
I see myself in the mirror. That's enough trauma for a day. And so that's, surprisingly enough, that's me as a therapist. But then as well, I take mindfulness and meditation into businesses. You can find me at change-works.co.uk. And that's my 2 websites. I've built them both myself, so I can definitely tell you they are not good websites. But they get you through to me, which is the big thing. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Horwich Hypnotherapy. You can find me on LinkedIn as Ben Kelly, the bald one, because there's a few Ben Kellys. You can find me on Facebook, same name, same head. Going forward as well, I'm excited to say I'll be working with a volunteering firm called Icarus.
I know it.
We're just doing my background checks at the moment, which I'm pleased to say are clean. And so I'm really excited about going and working with those wonderful people to help veterans with trauma. And there's a few other places that I'm hoping that people will be able to find me over the next few months that we're not quite ready to talk about. But beyond that, yeah, come and have a chat. Get me into your workplace where I'll teach you all mindfulness, meditation. If you have trauma, limiting beliefs, or any other changes you want to make, we can work in this office or we can work online. Generally, I have a terrible business model, which is always I want as little of someone's business as I can have. All of the people that impressed me the most when I started out were the people that were making rapid transformational changes. And so that's what I want to do. And then I run a mindfulness class in our local community center on a Saturday morning, which is subsidized by Horwich Hypnotherapy, so that it can be very, very affordable. So it's actually only £5 to come along. I think it's really important for people's mental health and just to have a community project going on. So that's me at the moment. Or later on, you'll see a glint up in the hills, because after this, I'm going hiking. Might wear a hat. I don't know if I need. There's a lot of cloud. I don't think I'll need a hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much how you can find me. I'm trying to make sure I'm as loud on social media as I can be. That's only been really the last 6 months or so. I kind of got over some of my own limiting beliefs about how much I wanted to be a businessman and how much I really wanted to have an online profile. And I realized that I didn't want to hide away the value that I'm offering people behind some silly beliefs that therapists shouldn't shout about what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I have absolutely loved talking to you both today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for all your awesome questions.
It's been great having you on, mate. It really has. It's been great to meet you. And like I say, we'll get you back on and we'll get you a bit more exposure on the trauma side. And I want to find out more about the solution-focused therapist about you as well. So it'd be interesting to
go near that.
We didn't go near it. So so we've got plenty to speak to next time. So
I very much look forward to it. Thank you both so much for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you, mate. As always, we always thank our supporters. Well, certainly my supporters is Promo Doodle, a Professional Bodyguard Association, Burnley District Motorcycle Club, and Mira Gavaccio. We also have our donations pages for the Easy Fundraising under the Mind Corps, and the GoFundMe page, which is under Retreat and Training Centre. All to help men and veterans with mental health issues. So any donations are always gladly welcome. Myself, Darren Alexandra, it's great to catch up with Ben and Alexandra as well. Thanks very much for listening and watching. And we'll hope. And Alexandra, as always, you put your little bit in last.
Yeah, just to give us a share, a comment, a like. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing everybody next time. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Alexandra.
Thank you so much.
Catch up with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.